The sun cast an orange glow over the sprawling expanse of Green Meadow Farm. It was a peaceful place, surrounded by rolling hills and lush fields. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the old oak tree standing sentinel over the barn. But beneath this quaint exterior lay secrets that most would never guess. On one particular evening, as dusk began to settle, an unwanted tension hung in the air. A group of thugs, caught up in their own bravado, had set their sights on the farm. They believed it was an easy target, a quiet place where they could score some quick cash. The thought of robbing the isolated farm felt almost like an adventure, a story they'd tell in smoke-filled rooms later, laughing about how simple it all was. But they were wrong. As the trio parked their truck behind a thicket, they tossed around edgy jokes, a sense of invulnerability cloaking them like a heavy fog. They approached the farm's main house, grinning, thinking of the valuables inside. But unbeknownst to them, the legacy of Green Meadow wasn't solely about crops and cattle. It was woven into the very fabric of its owners, the Thompsons. Henry Thompson was no ordinary farmer. For 30 years he had cultivated not just the land but a sense of community and family. He was a man forged by hardship, his hands rough from a life spent toiling under the sun. But behind those hands was a fierce protective instinct, a love for his family, a commitment to his land. As the thugs crept closer, a sense of unease began to bubble within Henry. He was in the barn, finishing up for the day, the rhythmic sound of hooves and the scent of hay his constant companions. The faint sound of laughter carried on the breeze, but it didn't sound like the laughter of friends. Henry stepped out into the twilight, the fading light catching the glint of an old shotgun resting against the barn wall. He hoped there wouldn't be a need for it tonight, but deep down, he felt the gravity of his responsibility to defend his family and their home. Suddenly, the thugs burst through the side gate, their laughter ringing out like a sinister note in the serene evening air. They swaggered toward the house, their confidence masking their ignorance of what lay ahead. Just a couple of old farmers, one of them sneered, clenching his fists in anticipation of an easy grab. They believed they would be in and out before anyone even noticed. But the quiet strength of the Thompson family was built from generations of facing adversity. As the thugs approached the porch, Sarah, Henry's daughter, stood watch through the window. At just 17, she had grown into a smart young woman, strong-willed and independent. She squinted, her heart pounding as she recognized their intentions. She had seen these faces before, the kind that twisted skins and dreams. Should she call her dad? Would they even have time? Without a second thought, Sarah reached for her phone and dialed 911. "I need help, quickly," she whispered urgently, trying to maintain her composure. Meanwhile, Henry moved in calculated silence, shifting between shadows, becoming one with the dusk. The thugs were too caught up in their bravado to see the storm brewing. "Come on, will you?" one of them boasted, slapping his partner on the back. But their banter faded quickly as they looked up and locked eyes with Henry. He stood there, tall, resolute. The shotgun rested firmly at his side, a grim reminder of the storm they had invited upon themselves. "Get off my property," he commanded, his voice steady, carrying the weight of 1,000 worries. The leader of the group laughed, muscles flexing as he took a step forward, dismissing the threat. "And what are you going to do, old man?" "What I do next is up to you," Henry replied, his voice now a calm echo cutting through the bravado. There was a heartbeat of silence. The thugs exchanged glances, a flicker of uncertainty crossing their faces. Henry's grip tightened on the shotgun, but behind his eyes there was more than anger. There was a fierce will to protect. In that moment, the quiet confidence of a simple farmer transformed him into something larger, something dangerous. As if sensing the shift in mood, Sarah steadied her breath as she watched through the window. A mixture of fear and pride swelled within her. She wanted to give her dad a chance to believe in him, but she also felt the suffocating grip of anxiety. "Back away now," Henry warned, his words hanging heavy in the air, the shadows stretching and twisting into ominous shapes around him. The leader rolled his eyes, still thinking of himself as the most powerful being in that moment. "You haven't got the guts to pull that trigger," he taunted. With a sudden fiery determination fueling his every movement, Henry raised the shotgun, the barrel aimed squarely at the thugs. The surprise on their faces felt like a high-stakes movie moment, the kind where the hero stands tall against all odds. But there was no Hollywood script here. This was life and death. The leader started to back away, a flicker of doubt creeping over his bravado. "Okay, old man, let's not do anything rash," he stammered, panic splintering his confidence. Henry's voice rang out, steady and fearless. "You can leave this farm tonight and I won't call the police." His grip tightened, and for a brief moment the world held its breath, the weight of fate teetering on the edge. The two thugs glanced at each other, confidence evaporating, reality settling in like a cold wind. They'd underestimated not just Henry but the strength of an unwavering protector. They began retreating slowly, backtracking across the lawn, their bravado unraveling thread by thread. Sarah's heart raced, each pulse echoing the tension building around them. She could see her father, a sentinel of courage, confronting the darkness head-on. Something inside her swelled a deep pride mixed with fear, swirling together like the encroaching night. At that moment the distant wail of sirens cut through the silence, a siren song of hope. The thugs froze, dread pooling in their eyes. They realized their time was running out. They turned and bolted toward their truck, scrambling away like hunted foxes fleeing the hounds. Henry kept his gaze steady, never wavering until they vanished into the darkness. He lowered the shotgun but felt the adrenaline coursing through him, a mixture of victory, fear, and the weight of a life almost lost. When the police arrived, they found Henry still standing on the porch, the fading sunlight illuminating his weathered face. "Everything's all right," he told them, but the words barely scratched the surface of the whirlwind he had just faced. Sarah rushed into his arms, relief flooding through her like the warm glow of morning sunlight. "Dad, you were amazing," she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. Henry smiled faintly, that protective instinct still roaring within him. "It's the love that can make us strong, Sarah." As the officers took their statements, the reality of their near tragedy settled in. The evening air felt different, charged with a sense of renewal. It was a reminder that sometimes the battles we least expect define us. In the days that followed, the township rallied around the Thompsons. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers came together, sharing the story of a farmer who wouldn't back down. The thugs were eventually caught, but what truly resonated was the spirit of community forged through that night of conflict. Henry and Sarah often recounted the events in hushed tones, grateful for the quiet again, but aware of the strength they had discovered. They became symbols of resilience, of a bond forged in courage and love. Each day, the farm thrummed with life and laughter, the thugs a distant memory. As the sun rose over Green Meadow Farm, casting its warm glow over the fields, it created not just a scene of beauty but a testament to the strength of a family that stood tall against the odds. The sprawling land, rich with untold stories, bore witness to a powerful truth. Sometimes, the quiet places hold the loudest battles, and sometimes the most unassuming heroes arise when the world would least expect them to. The sun had just begun to dip below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over Green Acres Farm. It was a beautiful scene, the sprawling fields, the soft mooing of cows, and the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. On the surface, it looked like any typical evening in the countryside. But moments can change everything, and tonight was no ordinary night. 3 thugs parked their beat-up pickup truck along the tree line, their eyes glinting with greed. They had cased the farm several times, thinking it would be an easy target. To them, it was just a quiet place with no one around to interfere. As they climbed out, they whispered excitedly about how little effort this would take the perfect score. They traded jokes and mock bravado, imagining how they would recount the night's adventures to their friends later. But what they didn't know was that they were about to step into a storm that would test every ounce of their arrogance. Inside the cozy farmhouse, the Thompson family was winding down for the evening. Henry Thompson, a rugged man with hands calloused from decades of hard work, had just finished dinner with his wife Martha and their teenage daughter Emily. The aroma of freshly baked apple pie wafted through the air. Laughter filled the room as they reminisced about summer days spent working in the fields. Suddenly, Henry's instincts kicked in. A whisper deep inside told him something was off. With uncharacteristic urgency, he stood and moved towards the window, peering out into the distance. His voice was calm, but his eyes reflected the brewing storm. In the fading light, he could see the shadows shifting near the barn. Henry squinted, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach. Those shadows were creeping closer to his home, and he knew every inch of the land he loved wasn't merely soil and crops, it was the heart of his family. Martha, sensing the tension, nodded and hurried off, her heart racing. Emily stood frozen for a moment, a mix of confusion and trepidation washing over her. "Stay inside, Emily. I need you to keep the phone handy." His tone was resolute, leaving no room for debate. As Henry moved through the house, his heartbeat quickened. He reached for the shotgun and checked the ammunition, feeling its cold weight settle confidently against his shoulder. There was a mingling of fear and purpose coursing through him. The instinct to protect his family was primal and unyielding. Outside, the three thugs, emboldened by a false sense of security, trudged toward the farmhouse, whispering taunts to one another. "Easy pickings," one of them jeered, adjusting his baseball cap backward. But just as they approached the porch steps, they eyed the barn where the silhouette of a man loomed. Henry had stepped outside, emerging like a guardian from the shadows of dusk. An unexpected chill coursed through the air, and the thugs felt the momentum shift. Henry's command thundered across the field, clear and unyielding. The thugs faltered, taken aback by the fierce intensity in his voice. The leader sneered, forcing confidence into his posture, even as uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "We're just here for a few things. You know, a little." Henry's voice brimmed with contempt. "You think it's fun to threaten a family." They might have been thugs, but the sheer will radiating from Henry was palpable, wrapping around the night like a cloak of steel. The lead thug glanced at his partners, uncertainty creeping onto their faces. This was not the simple heist they had banked on. There was a force here that they hadn't anticipated. But the leader scoffed, digging deeper into his bravado. "Shut up. We can take him. Just grab the shotgun," and in that split second, Henry's instincts kicked in once more. Without a moment of hesitation, he lifted the shotgun, steadying his hands, the only sound in the air being the heavy thud of his heart. "You take another step and I won't hesitate," he warned, the weight of his words filled with intent. The leader's confidence wavered, but desperation flared. Henry's eyes narrowed, a silent challenge vibrating between them. He stood resolute, embodying the spirit of the land he had tended for years. The thugs felt a chill seep into their bravado as they realized they were outmatched. This wasn't just a man. This was a protector, the embodiment of someone who wouldn't back down. Suddenly, from behind Henry, Emily stood in the doorway, gripping the phone tightly. She yelled, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. The thugs broke their gaze from Henry, eyes darting back toward the girl who was now part of this explosive moment. Henry barked without breaking his stare from the thugs, fully aware of the danger they brought into his world. With panic mounting, the thugs had a choice. The leader gritted his teeth, frustration boiling over. Just grab him. But the smell of fear was thick in the air, wrapping around them like a noose. They were not prepared for a fight, far from it. They had misjudged everything about the farm, about its defenses. Another step backward by the thugs drew the attention of Henry, who remained firmly planted, every fiber of his being ready to defend. With uncertainty hanging thick in the air, the leader hesitated just long enough for one of his accomplices to mutter, "Let's get out of here," panic clawing at his throat. They turned without another word, retreating down the steps they had just charged forward on. Henry shouted, his voice echoing in the night. With hearts racing, the thugs stumbled back toward their waiting truck. Their initial swagger had evaporated, replaced now by desperation. They jumped into the vehicle, the engine roaring to life with a cacophony of metal. Watching them, Henry felt a mixture of triumph and exhaustion wash over him. He lowered the shotgun but kept it ready, as the truck kicked up dirt and sped off into the night, leaving nothing but a cloud of uncertainty behind. Emily rushed to her father, her heart still pounding. She finally found the words, her disbelief palpable. "They did," Henry replied, shaking his head, the tension slowly leaving his body. The police arrived minutes later, blue lights flashing like distant stars in the darkness. Martha stepped outside, Worry etched across her face, but relief flooded her as she saw Henry and Emily unharmed. With voices raised, the officers collected statements, taking note of the vanishing thugs. They were seasoned at dealing with petty criminals, but tonight had been different, a confrontation fueled by the protectiveness of a father and the love of a family. The officers took the story back to town, a tale of courage that rippled through the community, transforming into whispers of admiration. This wasn't just a farm, it was a stronghold of tenacity. Over the next few days, news spread far and wide. Friends and neighbors arrived at the Thompsons' doorstep, bearing baked goods and words of support, their respect palpable. Green Acres wasn't just about crops anymore. It had become a symbol of resilience against those who would threaten it. Emily watched as her father stood amidst the crowd, laughing and telling the story of that fateful night. He was no longer just her father. He had become something greater, a protector, a hero to the community. But beyond all the admiration, the experience left something deeper. It unwrapped layers within Emily that she hadn't fully understood before. She began to see the world through a new lens, aware that courage wasn't always about strength. Sometimes it's about standing firm in the face of uncertainty, about choosing to defend what you love. As days turned into weeks, life on the farm settled back into its rhythms. Crops grew tall under the summer sun, animals roamed freely, and laughter replaced tension in the air. Yet the Thompsons held a newfound appreciation for the quiet moments, the laughter shared over dinner, the simple joys of life uninterrupted. And every now and then, Emily would catch her father staring out across the fields, as if he were in a quiet dialogue with the land. Maybe it was gratitude, or perhaps it was a deep-seated understanding of the battles fought and won. But one thing was clear. Green Acres Farm had stood strong against the storm and emerged not just unscathed, but revitalized. The thugs had underestimated the heart of the place, mistaking quiet for weakness. In the fabric of that community, a powerful lesson had been woven. Darkness might encroach, but as long as people believe in each other and stand together, the light will always find a way to shine through. And sometimes, even the most unsuspecting places can harbor the fiercest defenses, waiting patiently for the moment they need to rise. The sun set over Green Acres, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, a reminder that tranquility often lies just beneath the surface, ready to protect and preserve the bonds that hold us together. As the stars began to dot the night sky, the Thompsons knew they would never feel alone again, a quiet strength binding them to the land they loved. The sun sank low behind the swaying cornfields of Green Valley Farm, casting long shadows over the land. Crickets began their evening serenade, ushering in the peaceful lull of another day. It seemed tranquil, a typical night in the countryside. But sometimes stillness hides chaos just beneath the surface. On this fateful evening, 3 thugs parked their rusted pickup truck just outside the property line, chuckling amongst themselves, eyes gleaming with wicked anticipation. They had been watching Green Valley for days, convinced it was nothing more than an easy target, an isolated farm ripe for the picking. They imagined the thrill of an easy heist, picturing their escapades turning into glorious tales of bravado over beers at the local bar. "Look at this dump," the leader, tattooed and brimming with bravado, smirked as he scanned the quiet surroundings. "No one's even going to notice us." He thought they could snag quick cash, maybe some tools or electronics. To them, it was just an old farm with no one around to fight back. But they were about to learn a lesson that would shake their confidence to its very core. Inside the farmhouse, Henry Thompson wiped his hands on his overalls, fresh from a day's labor. He had built this farm from the ground up, planting roots that ran deep into the soil. Everything he did was for one purpose: to protect his family. He knew every creak of the floorboards and every rustle of leaves. That night, as he studied the darkening sky from the window, a faint whisper of intuition tugged at his gut. Something was off. "Marcy," he called for his wife, his voice steady but edged with concern. Emily, their teenage daughter, was in her room studying. She was bright, spirited, and had recently taken to voicing her dreams of expanding the farm, suggesting ways to modernize their business. Henry loved that about her, her ambition, her fire. But at that moment he was more concerned about keeping his family safe. Marcy nodded, sensing the tension in her husband's voice. As she moved toward Emily's room, Henry stepped outside onto the porch, the wooden boards creaking under his boots. The evening air felt heavy, charged with an unexplainable energy. He scanned the horizon, looking for any signs of trouble, but all he saw were the whispers of tall grass dancing in the wind. Just then, the sound of laughter erupted from the thugs as they climbed from their truck, the distant din slowly creeping closer. The leader flung open the gate, kicking it wide as his friends followed, each step filled with misplaced bravado. They quickly closed in on the house, fueled by an adrenaline rush, grinning at one another, expecting an easy haul. Henry's instincts kicked in. He felt the tension coiling in his stomach like a serpent as he spotted the intruders moving toward his home. They were miscalculating their prey. These men might have thought they were warriors in a movie, but Henry was no ordinary farmer. He was a protector and a fighter when it counted. He shouted, his voice a thunderclap against the evening stillness. Panic struck Marcy's heart, recognizing the urgency in his tone, but she didn't hesitate. She dashed down the hallway to Emily's room. "Emily, we need to go." The urgency in her mother's voice jolted Emily from her books. She had seen the look on Henry's face too many times to ignore it. Something wasn't right. "There are men coming onto the property." While they scrambled for safety, Henry's mind was racing. The thugs were too close for comfort, and he had to confront them. He reached into the storage closet and pulled out his old shotgun, the one passed down through generations, a family heirloom and a symbol of his resolve. He had always hoped it would never come to this. Outside, the thugs hadn't noticed the urgency that had already infected the house. They were too busy planning their easy cash-out. "Just a couple of old farm tools, that's all," one of them chuckled, glancing at the porch where Henry stood calmly, shotgun at his side, a steady glare locked on their approach. "Let's just grab what we can and get out of here," another suggested, still holding onto their bravado, but the laughter was fading as they saw the figure before them. Henry stood tall against the backdrop of the setting sun, a silhouette of determination. The leader called, confusion mingling with bravado. "You don't want to know," Henry replied, his voice low and gravelly, carrying the weight of 1,000 sunsets. The thugs exchanged glance, their laughter evaporating into the evening air, replaced by uncertainty. They had expected to intimidate an old farmer, not stand toe-to-toe with a man who exuded quiet strength. The leader sneered, trying desperately to regain control of the situation, but even he felt the shift in energy. Logic warred with bravado in their minds. They didn't come here looking for a fight, they came looking for an easy score. "Or I will protect my family and my home," Henry stated, the threat hanging heavy in the air. It was the moment of truth. Desperation seeped into the thugs' bravado like a slow poison. "Come on, man, we don't want to hurt anyone. Just let us grab a few things and we'll be out." The leader's voice cracked slightly, revealing the rattling nerves underneath. But Henry wasn't backing down. He lifted the shotgun slightly. The sound of the metal creaking sent shivers down the spines of the intruders. "You step 1 foot further, and I won't hesitate," Henry warned, steely determination reflected in his eyes. The students of fear replaced confidence in the faces of the thugs. They were acutely aware that they had underestimated their quarry. These were not just simple farmers, they were a family, and a fierce one at that. With every second ticking by, the reality of the confrontation settled in like a heavy fog. Henry shouted, his voice rising above the tension. Panic had replaced bravado, and the thugs backpedaled slowly, unsure of their next move. One of them finally yelled, breaking the trance. They turned tail and scrambled back to their truck, adrenaline saturating the air as they fumbled inside. Engine roaring to life, tires screeching as they tore away, kicking up dirt and gravel in their wake. But even as the truck sped into the distance, Henry's heart raced. It took a moment for the reality to settle in. The thugs were gone. They had come seeking an easy target, but they left having learned a lesson the hard way. Marcy emerged from the house, Emily at her side. They stood together on the porch, breathless and wide-eyed. Emily called out, rushing to his side. "I'm fine," Henry responded, exhaling slowly as he lowered the shotgun, but his voice shook less from fear than from the aftershocks of adrenaline. The weight of the moment hung like a storm cloud in the air. Marcy pressed her hand to her chest, relief washing over her as she stepped closer. She asked, searching Henry's eyes for reassurance. Henry's grip tightened around his weapon. "If they do, we'll be ready," he replied, knowing in that moment that they would face whatever came together united as a family. The incident rippled through their lives, leaving shadows in its wake. Days turned to weeks, and while life on the farm resumed its usual rhythms, the atmosphere felt different. Neighbors began checking in more frequently, offering support and camaraderie. They heard the story of Henry's stand, how this unassuming farmer became a symbol of resistance against fear. The townspeople rallied around the Thompsons, sharing tales of bravery while dropping off home-cooked meals and offering an extra set of hands whenever needed. For Emily, it was eye-opening to see the community connect, and she felt proud of her father, not just for standing tall but for inspiring those around him. One evening, a local newspaper reporter came by. "Mister," he asked, notebook in hand. "It doesn't feel brave or heroic," Henry replied, his voice calm. "It's about protecting what you love." He understood that the actions he took were rooted in something deeper, a commitment to his family and his land. As the seasons changed and the world outside carried on, the Thompsons fortified their defenses, but more importantly, they found strength in one another. Emily started volunteering with local community events, helping her father teach younger kids the importance of farming and resilience. And Henry began speaking to youth groups about the experiences he faced that day, sharing the importance of courage and standing up for what you believe in. The thugs had come with plans to steal away their lives, but instead, they had unknowingly woven the bonds of a community tighter, sparking a fire of resilience that spread like wildfire. One crisp fall evening, as the leaves burst into fiery shades of red and gold, the Thompsons hosted a harvest festival to celebrate their lives, their community, and the lessons learned. Laughter rang out as families gathered, sharing stories, and around a bonfire, the warm light flickered against tangled arms and joined hearts. With a twinkle in her eye, Emily marveled at the change in their small town. "You know, Dad, I think they underestimated us. They thought we were just farmers, but we've become something so much more," she said, warmth blooming in her chest. Henry smiled, proud of the woman she was becoming. "It's not about what they see." As stars began to twinkle overhead, the community illuminated the night with their shared strength, their laughter echoing across the farmland. Green Valley wasn't just a patch of land. It was a sanctuary forged in courage, a testament to resilience that would forever stand against the storm. And the thugs learned a powerful lesson that night. When you challenge a family, you're taking on a bond that's unbreakable, built upon love and unwavering resolve. Together, they had weathered the storm, now and forever, simply standing tall against the odds. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over Crestwood Farm, where a gentle breeze rustled through fields of golden wheat. For many, it was just another peaceful evening in the countryside. But for three men lurking in an old pickup truck just outside the farm's boundary, it was the perfect cover for their devious plan. They laughed, a raucous sound that seemed out of place in the serene surroundings. They believed the farm was an easy target, an isolated treasure trove ripe for the taking. "This is gonna be a piece of cake," the leader said, his voice dripping with confidence. He adjusted his baseball cap, eyes glinting with greed. His companions nodded, their bravado masking the undercurrent of nerves bubbling beneath the surface. Inside the farmhouse, Henry Thompson was wrapping up the day's work. With hands calloused from years of hard labor, he wiped the sweat from his brow and took a moment to breathe in the comforting sense of fresh hay and rich earth. But something nagged at him like a faint whisper in the back of his mind. He turned and glanced out the window, noticing the distant truck parked under the old oak tree, camouflaged by the failing light. Henry felt his heart race slightly. He wasn't a man prone to anxiety, but he had learned to trust his instincts. Something was off. He called out, his voice steady yet urgent. His wife Marcy emerged from the kitchen, flour dusting her hands. He gestured toward the window. Marcy squinted, her brow furrowing in concern. Meanwhile outside, the thugs huddled close, whispering and snickering, oblivious to the keen instincts of the farmer inside the house. "We'll grab some tools, maybe some cash," the leader whispered, his excitement booming through the dense air. As they exchanged enthusiastic tales of what they would do with their spoils, they didn't notice Henry had stepped silently out onto the porch, the evening air hanging heavy with tension. He stood tall, his shadow stretching before him, the fading light catching the outline of his rugged frame. He called out, his voice firm like thunder in the quiet night. The thugs froze. They hadn't anticipated being confronted, not by a farmer. The leader's bravado faltered. He waved a hand dismissively. "What's the old man gonna do?" Henry's instincts sharpened. "This is your only warning," he shouted. Panic washed over the group as disbelief morphed into unease. They had been ready for a heist, not a confrontation. The leader tried to mask his fear, stepping forward with a forced grin. "You really think you can scare us off?" And then, it happened. In one swift motion, Henry lifted an old shotgun he had kept close, pointing it straight at the intruders. The sight of the firearm, worn and familiar yet fearsome, evoked a primal instinct in the thugs. "You don't want to test me," Henry warned, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. The tension released in a sudden rush. The thugs' laughter turned to silence, mouths agape as they stared at the gun. The leader backed away slowly, eyes wide. "We don't want any trouble, man," he stammered. But Henry's resolve only deepened. His grip on the shotgun tightened, and the fading sunlight seemed to encapsulate his stance, a fiercely protective shield around him and his home. With fear creeping into every crevice of their bravado, the thugs turned and fled, bounding toward their truck, hearts pounding in rhythm with their heavy steps. The engine roared to life, and they sped off, the dust swirling in their wake like the remnants of their shattered confidence. As the truck disappeared into the distance, Henry lowered the shotgun, breathing heavily, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Marcy stood behind him, her hand resting on Emily's shoulder, who had stepped quietly out onto the porch, wide-eyed. Emily asked, concern etched across her youthful face. "I'm fine," Henry replied, but the edge of vulnerability lingered in his voice. The weight of the moment settled around them, a realization enveloping the Thompson family. They stood together in the fading light, breaths mingling as they processed what had just transpired. Henry's heart beat with pride and fear, a tempest of emotions raging inside him. They gathered inside, the atmosphere heavy with an unspoken apprehension. Each of them felt the secrets of the night weighing heavily on their shoulders. In the days that followed, the farm took on a different air, forever marked by the memory of the confrontation. Words circulated quickly in their small community. Friends and neighbors began to check in, offering support and asking about the incident. Henry and Marcy recounted their story, emboldened by the response of those around them. Yet, they felt a sense of vulnerability that lingered, a cold reminder of how quickly safety could be shattered. As the seasons changed, Henry's resolve shifted from fear to defiance. He began to fortify the farm, taking precautions to ensure his family's safety. But instead of isolating himself, he reached out to the community. "What happened here could happen to any of us," he would say. One evening, under a sky painted with deep oranges and purples, he gathered neighbors on their front porch. They talked about safety, about watching out for one another. The spirit of teamwork began to rise, woven into the very fabric of the town. Emily watched her father ignite something within their community, and it inspired her. In the days that followed, she initiated a neighborhood watch group. "We shouldn't be afraid to help each other," she declared during a meeting, her voice unwavering. The group met weekly, showcasing their unity. They shared stories, laughter, and strategies. It was enlightening. Emily saw her father standing taller, embracing this newfound purpose, reshaping the narrative from one of fear to resilience. But deep inside, the specter of that night lingered. What if those thugs returned? Their faces haunted her dreams, turning innocent nights into restless ones. The thought pushed her to further engage, strengthen their defenses, and create alliances. One afternoon, the neighborhood's shared determination bore fruit. They organized a community-wide meeting to discuss increasing security measures. The town hall was packed, and questions flew from all directions. Henry sat in the front row, A fire ignited in his heart as neighbors rallied around the fear that once gripped them. Together, they brainstormed solutions, building plans that went beyond just Crestwood Farm. They discussed neighborhood patrols, security systems, and connecting with local law enforcement for quick response times. Every voice mattered. Every idea was valued. In the following weeks, this community spirit shifted from mere conversation to action. Cameras were installed at strategic points, fences repaired, and watch schedules created, solidifying their commitment to protecting one another. They felt empowered, armed not just with tools but with heart and unity. One evening, as the leaves turned crimson and gold, Emily joined her friends in a community walk. They strolled through the fields, playfully laughing and discussing their hopes for the future. Suddenly, laughter turned to unease when a vehicle rolled up, the same rusty pickup truck that had threatened her family weeks earlier. Panic erupted as the group scattered, retreating to safety. But Emily stood frozen. This wasn't just a truck. This was the past coming back, a fear that had loomed over her for what felt like eternity. And then, just as dread began to creep in, she caught sight of her father stepping in front of her, shielding her from harm. "Stay behind me," he commanded, his voice a steady anchor amid the storm of emotions whirling around them. The thugs, now mere echoes of the fear they had once instilled, climbed out of the truck, faces twisted with resentment. "Thought we'd come visit the farm again," their leader sneered. Henry felt the iron grip of anger in his chest. "Get off my land." His voice commanded authority, forged in the fires of a father's love. Emily watched her father stand firm, and suddenly the frightening shadows of the past began to fade. With determination, she stepped from behind him, standing shoulder to shoulder with her dad. "No more fear," she declared, words pouring from her heart like water from a broken dam. "You don't get to intimidate us anymore." The thugs hesitated, confusion washing over them as they encountered the spirit of the community pushing back. One moment was all it took to shift the atmosphere. They hadn't just come up against a farmer. They faced a wave of interconnected souls ready to protect their own. Henry tightened his grip on Emily's shoulder, pride and love surging through him. "You've made a mistake thinking this is how it ends," he warned, voice even and unwavering. Faced with the strength of family, resilience, and community, the intruders recoiled, glancing at the gathered neighbors who had come to stand with the Thompsons. The leader sneered, but his bravado wavered, and in that instant they realized the power of a united front was mightier than they could have ever anticipated. "Let's get out of here," the leader mumbled, the bravado melting away as the truth settled in. They hurried back to their truck, hearts pounding, shame coating their retreat. As the engine roared to life and they sped away, relief washed over the Thompson family. Emily turned to her father, tears glistening in her eyes, but this time from a sense of empowerment. "We did it, Dad." Henry pulled her into a tight embrace. "You were incredible, Emily. We all were." The tension of the past faded like shadows at dawn, replaced by laughter and resolve shared among neighbors like a bond forged anew. They had turned fear into strength, and evening gatherings became rituals of unity and hope. Crestwood Farm thrived, not just as a patch of land but as a sanctuary of resilience. The shadows of those thugs became just that, shadows. They had tried to wreak havoc, but instead, they had sparked a fire of community that would burn brighter than they could have ever imagined. As the stars shimmered above the farm that night, the warmth of family encircled them, filled with laughter and love as they celebrated what they had built. The fight had changed them, but the bond had fortified them. They were a powerful testament, a family unyielding to the darkness, standing strong against the odds. Like the harvest that would come every year, they had sown seeds of resilience in the soil of their lives. And as long as their roots were strong, they could weather any storm, steadfast in the knowledge that true strength lies not in solitude, but in the embrace of unity and love. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over Pine Ridge Farm. A gentle wind rustled through the golden wheat, creating a sea of shimmering waves that danced like a soft melody. It was a tranquil setting, the kind of place where families shared laughter over dinner and children chased fireflies at dusk. But beneath this idyllic surface, a storm was brewing. 3 thugs parked their battered truck at the edge of the property, their laughter echoing against the tranquil backdrop. They believed this farm was an easy target, just an isolated patch of land where a few old farmers toiled away without anyone to protect them. Little did they know, they were about to step into a territory guarded fiercely by those who loved it. "Look at this place," the leader said, glancing out the window, a wicked grin spreading across his face. "It's practically begging to be looted." His companions exchanged nervous glances, but the bravado of their leader pushed them forward. They opened the truck doors and climbed out, eyes gleaming with greed. Across the way, inside the farmhouse, Henry Walker sensed the shift in the air. A man of sturdy build and deep experience, Henry had worked the land for years. He could tell when something was off. It wasn't just the rustling of the wind or the way the birds had suddenly gone silent. It was an instinct honed through countless days spent with nature. "Marissa," he called, his voice low but filled with authority. "Can you check on Ethan?" His wife Marissa nodded, her brow furrowed with concern. Henry stepped outside, the wooden porch creaking under his weight. The cool evening air filled his lungs, but inside a fire stirred. He moved quietly, his boots crunching over fallen leaves. Approaching the barn, he could see the trio huddled together, plotting their mischief. "Let's just grab a few tools and get out of here," one of the thugs snapped, still trying to maintain a shred of confidence. After all, they thought they were the predators, but they had no idea that Henry was watching them, determination radiating from his every pore. He was not just a farmer, he was a protector of his family, of this land that had been in his family for generations. As he assessed the scene, he realized he had one chance to turn the tide. "I suggest you boys leave now," he called out, voice steady with a hint of steel. The thugs froze, their laughter evaporating as they turned to face this unexpected figure. The leader barked, trying to mask his surprise with bravado. "I'm the man you chose to mess with, and I'm not going anywhere," Henry replied, lifting his chin defiantly. In that moment, time seemed to slow. It was a standoff characterized by unsaid words and simmering tension. Not one of those thugs had ever faced a real confrontation, and doubt began to crawl into their minds. They were used to easy victories, not staring down the resolve of a man willing to defend what he loved. They advanced a step, but Henry stood firm. "I'm going to count to 3, shouted the leader, his voice wavering slightly, but even he felt the quiver of fear beneath his bravado. Henry didn't flinch. This was no time for hesitation. He felt the weight of the shotgun resting against his shoulder, a family heirloom passed down from fathers to sons. He raised it carefully, pointing it squarely at the trio. The thugs exchanged nervous glances, their laughter fading into uncertainty. The leader's bravado had crumbled like a house of cards. "Let's just get out of here," he said, and his voice was sharp with panic now. With that simple statement, their plans unraveled. Confusion spread like wildfire, and the trio began to back away slowly, fear creeping into their movements. They were not prepared for this. This wasn't just an easy score. It became a lesson that night about underestimating strength. Henry's grip on the shotgun tightened. "Get in that truck and drive away." The thugs scrambled back to their vehicle, their confidence utterly shattered. The old man standing firm on his land had turned their bravado into foolishness. As they tore away, tires screeching, a newfound silence settled over the farm. Henry lowered his weapon, breath coming in pants, all laced with relief. Marissa emerged from the house, her worry etched in her features, quickly morphing into pride as she grasped what had just happened. She asked, her voice a mixture of concern and admiration. "I'm fine," he replied, still catching his breath, but the tension didn't lift completely. "We need to be careful." Over the next few days, the shadow of that night lingered in the corners of their minds. It was a reminder that danger could lurk where it was least expected. The community became aware of the incident, tales of the confrontation spreading like wildfire. Friends and neighbors arrived at the farmhouse, offering support as well as reassurance. Henry welcomed them but felt an ache in his heart. He was used to working hard and keeping to himself. He didn't want trouble to cast a shadow over his family's home, but the fear had already seeped in. He began to fortify the farm, installing motion lights and securing the barn doors. Meanwhile, Ethan, their young son, watched his father closely. He didn't understand all of it, but he saw determination burning in his father's eyes. he asked quietly one evening. "Always, son," Henry replied, his voice filled with a resolve meant to reassure. That sentiment echoed in their home, but even so, the threat still lingered like a shadow. The family worked together, strengthening their bond through newfound discussions of safety, resilience, and community. Ethan wanted to help, joining his father in reinforcing fences and learning how to handle the tools necessary to protect their way of life. "You taught me how to work the farm, Dad," he said, determination flashing through his young eyes. Henry smiled, but within him he felt a mix of pride and sadness. His son was growing up so fast, seemingly overnight. They shared conversations late into the night, just the two of them discussing their hopes and fears. "I think we're protecting the farm together," Ethan said one night, eyes wide with understanding of what it meant to support one another. That's when Henry realized that the incident had sparked more than just fear. It ignited a fire, to be strong for one another and not to shy away from the community that surrounded them. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Marissa spoke up. "Henry, we can't just sit here and wait. We need to reach out. People are worried." He pondered her idea, understanding it was crucial to not only fortify their home, but also strengthen the ties within their community. The very next week, nestled under a starry sky, neighbors gathered on the Walkers' porch, faces illuminated by the glow of the evening light. Everyone shared their fears and concerns. Henry took the lead, recounting the tale of what had happened. "We can't allow these thugs to intimidate us," he said passionately. As the group spoke, Henry felt the tension lift, replaced by a palpable strength that began to weave through the air. They discussed creating partnerships, starting a neighborhood watch, and ways to communicate quickly with one another. Each suggestion felt like a thread tying them closer together. As the meeting came to a close, camaraderie stood strong among them. Neighbors exchanged numbers, committed to check in on each other regularly. They promised to be vigilant, united against anything that threatened their sense of security. Weeks turned into months, as community spirit blossomed like brightly colored flowers after a cold winter. They organized regular check-ins, helped one another with vacation watches, and even collaborated on farm shares. The threat of danger transformed into a collaborative force of resilience and support. Yet, in their shared journey, the specter of the thugs loomed at the back of Henry's mind. There were times when he'd feel a prickle of unease, wondering if they might return, but each time, Marissa would take his hand, grounding him in the present. "We have each other," she reminded him gently. Their bond only deepened, more fortified than the fences around their property. Ethan found comfort in the laughter of his friends flocking to the farm. They'd climb trees, chase after goats, and enjoy the sweet taste of summer fruits. The earlier fear had slowly begun to fade, replaced by a warmth that filled their hearts. But the undeniable reality remained. What if the thugs returned? One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, the distant rumble of tires caught Henry's attention. His heart raced as he peered into the distance. A truck, familiar in shape and size, drove closer. He felt adrenaline spike. "Marissa, Ethan." His voice was clear and commanding, panic creeping into his chest. Ethan dropped his toy and dashed inside with Marissa, the door slamming behind them. Henry stood by the big oak tree, facing the approaching truck, the weight of history and protection settling squarely upon his shoulders. As the vehicle slowed and the familiar faces emerged, a cold shiver slithered down his spine. The lead thug stepped out, cocky as ever. "Well, well," he taunted, clearly unimpressed by the changes, but Henry could see the facade cracking. Henry's voice thundered back, echoing with unyielding authority. "We came to see how the strong farmer and his little family are doing," the thug said, eyes narrowing with malicious pleasure. But Henry stood tall, unwavering. "This is a community now." With that statement, the tension thickened, every heartbeat echoing the significance of that moment. A battle of wills unfolded between them, but standing behind Henry was the strength of a small army neighbors peeking from windows, hands ready to take action. "Maybe you ought to rethink that attitude," the thug sneered, but he could see the resolve, the kinship, radiating from Henry and the community. Before he could say another word, a voice rang out from behind Henry. You think we're afraid of you." It was Ethan, fearless, standing bravely alongside his father. The thug froze, stunned by the young boy's courage. It was a moment that transformed the landscape of fear. The community had risen together. Every neighbor that had gathered behind Henry, standing side by side, united against the shadows of the past. "Leave," Henry warned, his voice low and filled with thunder. With that, the thugs turned, scrambling back into their truck, sense of defeat washing over them like a cold tide. As they sped off, the weight of their presence lifted from the farm. Cheers erupted from the community, folks stepping out of their homes, celebrating this small but powerful victory. Henry turned to his son, engulfed in overwhelming pride. In that moment, a new dawn began to blossom. Together, they had transformed fear into strength, vulnerability into resilience. The world around them felt brighter, a testament to the power of unity sparked by a shared experience. Days turned into weeks, and the farm thrived, not merely as a piece of land but as a beacon of hope. Pine Ridge wasn't just a farm, it had become a sanctuary, a testament to the unbreakable bond of family and friends standing firmly together against the odds. The thugs may have thought they were strong, but they had underestimated the heart of a community. As Henry reclined on the porch with his family, the sun setting behind them, he understood that true strength lies not in weapons, but in love, loyalty, and the bravery to stand tall together. And in that unity, they had discovered their hope, their home, forever shielded by the love they shared against any threat that might dare to come. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden hue over Maplewood Farm. Horses grazed peacefully in the fields, and the faint sound of chickens clucked nearby. It was a picture-perfect scene, like something straight out of a postcard. But for three men waiting in a pickup truck just outside the property line, it was the perfect time to strike. "Look at this place," the leader said, a mixture of excitement and greed dancing in his eyes. "No one's going to stop us here." His two companions nodded, their faces a blend of bravado and nervousness. They had scouted this farm for days, convinced that it was an easy target, just an old farmer and his family, too oblivious to see what was coming. Unbeknownst to them, Maplewood Farm was more than just a piece of land. It was a home, a sanctuary lovingly tended by generations. And Henry Jacobs, the farm's owner, was no ordinary farmer. He was a man forged by years of hard work, a father and a protector. And he had a sense for danger. Inside the farmhouse, Henry glanced out of the window while cleaning a set of tools. The faint sound of laughter from the men outside raised a silent alarm in his gut. Closing his eyes for a moment, he took a deep breath, sensing that something was very off. He called to his wife, urgency in his voice. Marissa looked up, concern etched across her face. He gestured towards the window. As Marissa moved out of the room, Henry grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, the wooden porch creaking beneath his heavy boots. The evening air felt charged, filled with unspoken tension. His heart raced as he approached the edge of the property. He could see the three men now, their laughter pouring over the serene landscape like an ominous shadow. The leader leaned back against their truck, clearly reveling in the thrill of their scheme. "Once we grab a few tools, we'll be out of here." In that moment, Henry knew he couldn't let this happen. He straightened up, channeling every ounce of authority he possessed. "Hey!" The men turned, smiles fading into confusion. The leader's tough guy act was faltering. "That's my property you're standing on," Henry said, stepping closer, heart pounding but his resolve unyielding. For a brief moment the air stilled. The thugs looked at one another, uncertainty creeping into their bravado. They had expected an easy score, not a confrontation. The leader shot a glance at his companions and, in a feeble attempt to reclaim control, smirked. Before they knew it, Henry raised the flashlight high, its beam illuminating the driver's face and revealing every trace of their dilapidated plan. "You don't want to find out," he warned, voice steady like a mountain. Panic seeped into their expressions. It was one thing to threaten an old man. It was another to challenge him when he stood firm. With each heartbeat, the tension thickened and they began to back away. For every inch they moved, Henry took a step forward, planting himself like a tree rooted firmly in the earth. He commanded. Feeling cornered, the leader waved dismissively. "You're bluffing." But Henry wasn't in the mood for games. "I'm counting to 3, he said, raising his flashlight higher. "Let's just go," one of the thugs muttered, fear creeping into his voice. Henry continued, unwavering. The complex mixture of fear and bravado in their eyes crystallized into a moment of clarity. These were not just hapless victims. They were fully aware of the consequences now. The leader's bravado eroded as he muttered something incoherent and spun around, beckoning his friends to follow. With hearts pounding, they bolted to the truck, scrambling inside as panic replaced greed. Screeching tires filled the night air as they sped off, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a sense of disbelief. Henry exhaled sharply, the adrenaline coursing through him like wildfire. He turned and walked back toward the house, the faint sound of Marissa's voice calling to him merging with the quiet of the fading evening. When he finally reached the porch, she was waiting for him, eyes wide, both terrified and proud. "They thought they could take what's ours," Henry said, shaking his head. The reality of what just transpired settled over them like a rain cloud, and for the next few days an uneasy tension lingered in the air. Word spread throughout the small community, and neighbors began to check in more frequently, their faces reflecting concern and solidarity. "Henry, you need to be careful," one neighbor warned, voice low. "Yeah, I know," Henry replied, the weight of anxiety settling heavily on his shoulders. He began fortifying the farm, adding locks and motion lights, turning his home into a fortress. But even with these changes, the nagging fear remained. The thought of that confrontation replayed in his mind like a broken record. Every creak of the house felt amplified, and darkness eerily fell heavier than it used to. As nights rolled on, Marissa often found Henry staring out of the window, tension etched in his features. She wanted to console him, to ease the storms warring inside him, but words often escaped her. "You're not alone in this," she finally said one evening, standing beside him. "Together," he echoed, though the weight of fear still bore down on him. Weeks passed, and life continued on the farm, yet the remnants of fear clung like fog. Ethan, their curious son, sensed something was off. He asked one evening while they sat around the kitchen table, the soft glow of a lamp illuminating their worried faces. Henry smiled gently, ruffling his son's hair. "We're safe, buddy." But even as he spoke those words, he felt the truth slip through his fingers like sand. The reality weighed heavy. How long could they stay safe if no one was watching? Then came the decision to gather the community. Marissa suggested they organize a meeting, a way to connect and confront the fear together. "We can't let them win," she urged. Henry thought about it, realizing she was right. If they stood alone, they would always be vulnerable. That Friday evening, families chipped in to gather on the farm, their spirits mixed with apprehension and hope. As neighbors arrived, Henry felt a sense of unity begin to form. "Thank you all for coming," he said, heart racing, but his voice resonated with resolve. "I know we've all been worried." As they discussed their fears, each person spoke out, creating an environment of camaraderie. People shared tales of their own close calls, experiences that had shaken them to their roots. A woman with gray hair recalled the time someone tried to break into her shed. "I yelled and they ran," she said, laughter breaking the tense atmosphere. Henry watched as the collective energy transformed the room. There was something powerful in coming together, a wildfire sparked by shared experiences. Ideas began to flow, suggestions for a neighborhood watch, organizing patrols, and perhaps even connecting with local law enforcement. Ethan chimed in, the tenacity of youth shining through his voice. The suggestion ignited a chorus of agreement. Soon, they were forming a plan, rounding out pamphlets, exchanging contact information, and brainstorming ways to be vigilant. That night, as people departed, Henry felt the weight of anxiety begin to lift. Standing on the porch beside Marissa, he looked out into the night sky, a settling sense of relief washing over him. They had taken steps, becoming a united front against any threat that loomed. Days turned to weeks, and the community rallied around this newfound connection. They implemented checks, ensuring everyone was aware of their surroundings. A sense of vigilance crept into the atmosphere, and lives buzzed with energy as families shared meals and laughter together. And yet, in the recesses of Henry's mind, the threat of those thugs lingered. He pushed the thought away, finding solace in the warmth of community that had become a second family, a family that would protect one another. As summer unfolded, the rituals of farm life continued, planting seeds, harvesting crops, and gathering under the stars. Ethan thrived, drawing joy from learning everything his father taught him about the land. But that shadow still loomed, just beyond the horizon. Then one fateful evening it happened. As twilight fell, Henry heard a sound that made his heart race. A distant truck engine whined closer. He moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. "Marissa, Ethan," he shouted, urgency charging his voice. Marissa raced to grab their son as Henry bolted to the front porch, gripping the baseball bat that had once served as a symbol of summer games. It was time to protect his family again. The truck rolled to a stop, headlights illuminating the darkened yard. As it turned off, the thugs climbed out, faces masked with malice. The moment lingered like a flashpoint, a moment filled with equal parts dread and determination. Henry called out, resolute, bat firmly in hand, two figures standing protectively behind him. The leader smirked, a mix of disbelief and defiance plastered across his face. "Leave now or I'll call the police," Henry warned, his voice unwavering. The thug scoffed, taking an angry step forward, pushing boundaries. Henry didn't flinch. He had seen these men before, and he would not be intimidated. "This is your last chance." Marissa stepped forward, fierce protectiveness palpable in her stance. "You're not welcome here. You've already threatened our family once." The thugs paused, taken aback by the strength of the family standing against them. They might have thought Maplewood was an easy target, but the very land they sought to violate resonated with layers of bravery. As they stood firm, silent resolve blossomed among them, a small army of determination in the face of men who believed they could intimidate. The shadows grew longer, night encroaching as the tension built to a breaking point. "Back off," Henry shouted, taking a step forward with the bat raised high, defiantly. Fear flashed across the leader's face, and he hesitated. The unity of strength radiating from Henry and his family began to chip away at their bravado, revealing a stark vulnerability beneath. With a final look exchanged between them, the thugs turned and bolted for their truck, scrambling to get out as quickly as they could. As tires screeched, Henry lowered the bat, pulse racing. Marissa started, disbelief etched across her face. Henry nodded, feeling the waves of triumph rise within him. "We stood our ground." That night the family embraced in relief, laughter breaking through the tension that had gripped their farm for so long. The shadows of fear began to fade, replaced by the warmth of strength, resilience, and community. News spread quickly among neighbors, reverberating with a sense of victory and pride. They had faced danger together, standing firm against the darkness. In the following weeks, life on Maplewood Farm flourished. With each passing day, the bond between families strengthened, and they came together not just for protection but for joy, for laughter, and for cultivating a sense of belonging. That night marked a turning point. It wasn't just about a farmer protecting his land. It was about a community rising up, fueled by love and resolve. They had turned the tide, creating a place where danger couldn't reach them, a sanctuary dauntless against the odds. As Henry leaned back on his porch, gazing at the stars twinkling overhead, he realized that with that bravery came hope. They had transformed fear into strength, shadows into light, standing united against whatever challenges lay ahead. The sun would rise again over Maplewood Farm, a promise of new beginnings, shared laughter, and a community forever bound together in the bonds of resilience. And beneath that sky, they knew they could weather any storm, standing tall and proud, forever guarding what they loved most. The sun hung low over Willow Creek Farm, casting long shadows that stretched over the fields of golden corn. It was a peaceful evening, a picturesque scene that seemed untouched by the chaos of the world. But lurking just outside the boundary, a pickup truck sat idle, its engine humming quietly, harboring a sense of purpose that was anything but peaceful. Three thugs, a motley crew draped in leather jackets and filled with youthful bravado, had been watching the farm for days. They parked in the overgrown thicket, convinced this isolated land was an easy target, ripe for the taking. "Look at it," the leader sneered, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Just some old farmer and his family." They believed they were predators in this story, ready for a simple heist. Tools, cash, maybe some equipment. How hard could it be? But inside the farmhouse, Henry Taylor sensed danger closing in. He was a man shaped by the land, with hands worn heavy from years of toil and a spirit unyielding. The evening felt different, charged like the air before a storm. Something had shifted. He called out, his voice firm but laced with urgency. His wife Marissa emerged from the kitchen, flour dusting her apron. "Just a feeling," he replied, turning toward the window, squinting at the distant trees. The shadows of 3 figures flitted between branches, laughter echoing through the stillness, a sound that set his heart racing. "Stay close and keep the doors locked," he urged. Henry stepped out into the crisp evening air. The porch creaked beneath him, a familiar sound now tinged with anxiety. He made his way towards the barn, senses heightened, the weight of every step heavy with purpose. As he approached the edge of the property, he spotted the thugs loitering near the farmhouse, their confidence bubbling over in careless laughter. "Let's just grab what we can and be gone before they even notice," one of them scoffed, a cocky grin plastered on his face. Unbeknownst to them, they were walking into a nest of resolve. Henry moved steadily, eyes narrowing. He could see the leader flexing, believing himself a cunning wolf among sheep. Henry shouted, his voice booming like thunder, cutting through their laughter. The thugs turned, faces shifting from amusement to shock. The leader stumbled, momentarily caught off guard. "You're trespassing," Henry replied, standing tall, a sturdy figure filled with unwavering determination. For a heartbeat, the air thickened with tension. The thugs exchanged nervous glances, and doubt crept into their bravado. This wasn't how their evening was supposed to go. They had come for an easy score, but they hadn't counted on facing a man who loved his land fiercely. "Come on, old man," one of the younger thugs sneered, the bravado in his voice cracking. "What are you going to do?" Henry's heart raced, but he held his ground. "You'll find out if you don't leave," he warned, emphasizing every syllable as he gauged their reaction. Before the leader could respond, Henry raised a sturdy stick he had grabbed from the ground earlier, a makeshift weapon in his hand. The thugs looked at one another, uncertainty pulling at their confidence like an anchor. Henry shouted, voice echoing against the backdrop of the surrounding fields. The weight of that moment hung heavily in the air. The leader's bravado crumbled, fear creeping into the corners of his mind. He barked, trying to mask his panic. But the illusion of dominance was splintering before his eyes. "Leave now and this doesn't have to get ugly," Henry stated, lips pressed into a thin line, eyes sharp with resolve. In a startling instant, the thugs began to retreat, glancing back and forth as if unsure of the reality enveloping them. They hurried back to their truck, fumbling for the door handles. As the engine roared to life, their hearts raced, leaving behind their confidence in a cloud of dust as they tore away from the farm, urgency clawing at their every move. Henry stood still, bathed in the fading light, breathing a sigh of relief mingled with disbelief. They had underestimated him, and he felt a surge of triumph pulse through him. But as the adrenaline wore off, worry crept in. What if they came back? It didn't take long for the news to spread. The town buzzed with chatter about the attempted break-in. Neighbors came by, concern etched across their faces. One woman asked, worry clouding her features. "We're fine," Henry replied, though he felt the tension coil within him. He could see that fear now wrapped around them, unsettling like a thick fog. Despite his attempts to reassure everyone, calm was elusive. The next few days passed slowly, shadows lurking in every corner of the farm. Each rustle of leaves brought Henry's heart racing, and the fear of what might happen next loomed heavy. One evening, he gathered his family around the worn dining table. Ethan, their young son, played with his food, casting furtive glances at his father. He finally asked, the question hanging in the air heavily. "Always, buddy," Henry replied, his voice steady as he ruffled Ethan's hair. But deep down, he knew he needed to do something more than just reassure them. The following day, with the weight of fear still pressing down, Henry made a decision. It was time to take control. He called for a town meeting, inviting neighbors to share their stories and come together as a united front. That Friday evening, the old barn buzzed with voices, each face illuminated with a struggle against uncertainty. As Henry stood at the front, he saw familiar faces, people he had known for years, now bonded by shared trepidation. "Thank you all for coming," he began, the sincerity of his voice washing over the crowd. "We can't let fear dictate how we live." People nodded, murmurs of agreement filling the barn. They shared their own close call stories of broken fences and strange sounds in the night. With each tale, the air thickened with communal strength. "We should start a neighborhood watch," an older man suggested, his voice strong. As the discussion flowed, every voice added to the tapestry of resilience. Ideas emerged, setting up patrols, installing security cameras, and even coordinating regular check-ins with one another. Each step towards unity felt like a balm healing the wounds of fear. As the meeting ended, Henry felt a sense of renewed purpose growing within him. They were not just a group of farmers. They were a community, ready to take a stand against anything that threatened their homes. Days turned into weeks, and life at Willow Creek began to feel safer. Phone numbers exchanged, patrols established, the shared laughter of families echoed across the fields as they supported one another. But deep down, Henry still sensed the looming threat, like a shadow lingering at the edge of his vision. The night air felt heavier as he glanced around, feeling a pull of unease that refused to dissipate. Then one chilly evening it happened again. As Henry sat in the living room with Marissa and Ethan watching a movie, the familiar sound of tires crunching gravel broke through the calm. Instinctively he shot up, heart racing. "Marissa, Ethan," he barked, urgency pouring through every word. Marissa gripped Ethan's arm, her eyes wide with fear. They knew the weight of those words. They were no longer whispers of worry but sounds of impending dread. As Henry peered through the window, his heart sank. The same truck, battered and worn, rolled to a stop outside. The thugs emerged, emboldened, faces twisted with that same arrogance they had worn before. The leader sneered, a cruel grin spreading across his face. But this time was different. This time, Henry stood not as a lone man but as a pillar of strength, fortified by the gathered community. He shouted, voice booming through the night. The leader taunted, stepping closer, confidence rolling off him like poison. But behind Henry stood Marissa and Ethan, their own fierce bravery radiating outward. Marissa called out, her voice unyielding with a strength that surprised even herself. The confrontation charged the air with energy, the resolve of every neighbor echoing in the background, their shared experiences merging into one unified force. "Leave, now," Henry warned, his voice steady and unwavering. Fear flickered across the thugs' faces, and they began to process the reality before them. This wasn't just a man protecting his home. This was a community ready to fight back against the tide of intimidation. The power of unity enveloped them like a thick fog, leaving the thugs disoriented. The leader shouted, turning to bolt back to their truck. But as he reached for the door, something caught his eye, a flash of light from the neighboring fields. It was a group of neighbors emerging from the shadows, holding flashlights and tools. They'd been waiting, ready to defend what mattered most. Panic seeped into the thugs' expressions as the realization dawned on them. They weren't just facing Henry, they were staring down an army. In a baffling moment, they understood they had misjudged their prey. With adrenaline churning, they scrambled to their truck, but before they could pull away, Marissa stepped forward, tears in her eyes yet fierce in spirit. "If you come back, we will be ready," she warned, shaking with righteous anger. The thugs hastily peeled out, dust clouding the air behind them, leaving nothing but the echo of their departure. As the tension began to settle, a wave of relief washed over the crowd. They had banded together and made their stand against the darkness creeping into their lives. But deep down, Henry felt a gnawing sense of something unfinished. This wasn't just a small victory. It was a statement. Days turned into a whirlwind of preparations and discussions, but as time passed, the shadows of fear began to fade, replaced by laughter and resilience. However, as the summer nights rolled on, uncertainty still loomed above them, threatening the tranquility they had fought to protect. And then came the moment that would forever change everything. One fateful morning, news broke that sent shockwaves throughout the community. Another farm had been hit. Reports flooded in about a brazen daytime robbery just a few miles away, a reminder that the thugs hadn't just disappeared, they were still out there, lurking, plotting, vengeful. Henry joined a group of neighbors at the coffee shop, worry glazed over every face. They spoke of precaution and vigilance, but anger simmered beneath the surface. "We need to send a message," one neighbor declared, fists clenched with resolve. Beneath the chatter, Henry's heart raced. He couldn't shake the sense that they were facing something far worse than petty thuggery. It felt almost personal now. As the sun began to set, casting an orange hue across the sky, Henry leaned in, his voice low but firm. "I won't sit idly by and let them take what's ours." The room buzzed with agreement, suggestions pouring forth about how they could elevate their efforts, but deep inside, Henry's instincts pulled at him. He felt a dark energy coiling in the back of his mind, a realization settling like a heavy stone. That night, as he lay next to Marissa, the weight of their choices loomed over him. He whispered, fear creeping into his voice. Marissa turned, rubbing his arm soothingly. "We can't let the fear win." But Henry knew they weren't just fighting against thugs. They were battling a darkness that threatened to consume everything they held dear. And as the night deepened, a chilling feeling sank into the depths of Henry's heart, the kind of fear that speaks of storms yet to come. Tomorrow could bring not just a fight for their home, but a confrontation that might change everything. Little did he know, a storm was brewing just beyond the horizon, an impending clash that would test the very bonds of their community, one that would wrestle with the question of how far they were willing to go to protect what they loved. As dawn broke over Willow Creek, the world held its breath, and Henry braced himself for turmoil, unaware that the darkness had already begun to close in.